If you're using store procedures, version 24.1 comes packing with a bunch of really interesting improvements that will help you get the most out of store procedures in CockroachDB. These features include the ability to call store procedures from store procedures, the ability to explicitly control transactions from within store procedures, the ability to use multiple out parameters, and support for the no data found exception. Those are the things I'll be demoing today. There's also nested blocks, so you can nest blocks in store procedures now to help with things like complex control flow and to control error propagation within your store procedure. And there's also exit and continue statements, another construct to help you manage complex logic flows within your store procedures. I'll spin up a local demo cluster. I call my local 24.1 binary CRDB instead of Cockroach just to help me differentiate. I'll create an account table with an ID and a balance, and I'll get right to creating some store procedures. So the first one I'll create is a balance check. This will be called from another store procedure, so there's nothing inherently exciting about this one. The next store procedure will be calling that store procedure and setting some explicit transaction variables. So when the transaction starts, I immediately commit, allowing me to start a fresh transaction with a high priority level and serializable isolation. For example, if read committed was the default isolation level in this database, I can ensure that I use serializable to perform these transactions. I call off to the balance check just to make sure there are sufficient funds in the from account to make the transaction. I decrement the balance of the from account and I increment the balance of the to account, and then I commit, raising a notice to show me the new balances of both accounts. I'll create 4 accounts and I'll perform some transfers. First, I'll transfer 500 from account A to account B. And we can see we now have 500 in the from account and 1,500 in the to account. If I perform that same transfer again, we now have 0 in the from account and 2,000 in the to account. If I try to perform the transfer again, we'll get an error saying there are insufficient funds. That error came from our nested balance check call. I'll transfer the amounts back, and now both accounts have 1,000 again. The next thing I'd like to demo is multiple out parameters. So in this scenario, I take the from ID and the to ID, and I return the from balance and the to balance. So I'm essentially returning both account balances at the same time. If I call that from outside a store procedure, you'll see that the from balance and to balance are both 1,000 as expected. And next, I'll create a store procedure that uses this. I've called it Robin Hood because it steals from the rich and gives to the poor. There's a from balance, a to balance, which will be populated from a nested call to our new multi-balance check store procedure. I determine which is the rich account and which is the poor account, and then I transfer half of what the rich account has into the poor account. To test that, let's see what we have in accounts C and D to start off with. C has a balance of 10,000 and D has a balance of 10. If I call the Robin Hood function, the amount to transfer to make the balances fair across both accounts is 4,995. It determined that the rich account was C, the poor account was D, and it made the transfer. Let's have a look at those accounts again. And now we can see that they've been balanced out. Both accounts are equally rich. And if I call the Robin Hood store procedure again, we'll see that I now throw an exception to say both accounts are equally rich. Finally, I'll show you the no data found exception handling. And this is made possible because of the strict keyword here. This store procedure ensures that this account has at least enough funds to transfer this amount. If an account doesn't exist, I catch a no data found exception and then raise my own exception to say the account does not exist. First, I'll call ensure balance on a valid account that has sufficient funds. Next, I'll call the function for a valid account with insufficient funds. And finally, I'll call it for an invalid account. The exception has been handled and I've raised a new custom exception. If the error was handled, this doesn't have to be thrown at all. But in this case, I just wanted to surface up that the exception has been caught. That's it for store procedures in version 24.1. Have a play with them and let us know if you have any feedback on any of them. It's always appreciated.